Either she goes or I do. Those were the exact 6 words my older sister screamed at my parents on my 18th birthday, holding her packed suitcases like a hostage negotiator. She gave them an ultimatum: kick out their youngest daughter, or lose her forever. My parents didn't even hesitate. Before the sun went down, my trash bags were on the porch, and the front door was locked behind me. For 10 long years, I was dead to them. I rebuilt my life from absolute zero, brick by painful brick, while my sister paraded her victory to anyone who would listen. But karma doesn't forget an address. Exactly 10 years later, a sudden knock on my door brought a terrified stranger begging for help, holding a document that turned my sister's decade-long empire into dust. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Chloe, and I'm 28 years old today. But whenever I look back at my 18th birthday, it doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like a crime scene. Growing up, my older sister Evelyn was the unquestioned center of our universe. She was stunning, charismatic, and a master of emotional manipulation. Our parents walked on eggshells around her, constantly sacrificing my needs to keep her happy. If Evelyn wanted something, she got it. If she made a mistake, I was somehow blamed for it. But I never imagined just how far she would go to completely erase me from the family. It happened on the night of my 18th birthday. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eagerly waiting to open a small gift for my grandmother, when Evelyn marched down the stairs carrying 3 heavy suitcases. She threw them onto the living room floor with a deafening crash. Tears streamed down her face in a performance so dramatic it deserved an Oscar. She looked at our terrified parents and dropped a bombshell. She claimed I had stolen her entire college fund, stole her prized possessions, and made her feel unsafe in her own home. It was a complete, calculated lie, but Evelyn delivered her ultimatum with ice in her voice. Either she goes or I do. My parents didn't ask for proof. They didn't even look at me for an explanation. My mother immediately began crying, begging Evelyn not to leave, while my father turned toward me with a cold, unforgiving glare. Without a single word of hesitation, he walked up to my room, grabbed black plastic trash bags, and shoved my clothes inside. Before the sun had even set on my birthday, my belongings were sitting on the wet porch, and the deadbolt clicked shut behind me. I stood on the sidewalk in the freezing rain with $50 in my pocket, completely abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me. Standing on that soaked pavement, watching the ambient light from our living room window bleed out through the blinds, a cold realization settled deep into my bones. No one was coming to open that door. No one was going to apologize. If I wanted to survive, I had to stop waiting to be saved. Those first few years were a brutal blur of survival mode. At 18, I was sleeping in a beaten-up 2002 sedan I bought for $600, parking in well-lit 24-hour grocery store lots just to catch a few restless hours of sleep before my morning shift. I worked 3 jobs back-to-back, waitressing at a diner, wiping down gym equipment late at night, and working the register at a local hardware store. Every single spare dollar went toward tuition at a local community trade school where I studied real estate and property management. My hands were always calloused, my eyes were constantly tired, but my spirit refused to break. By the time I turned 24, my relentless grinding paid off. I started my own boutique property management firm. What began with managing 2 small residential units eventually expanded into a portfolio of commercial real estate. By 26, I was financially independent, living in a quiet, sunlit condo, and building a life grounded in peace, security, and hard-earned dignity. Meanwhile, through distant mutual acquaintances I occasionally ran into, fragments of my family's life filtered back to me. Evelyn had married into a prominent, wealthy family in the city, driving expensive luxury cars and throwing lavish parties. But I also learned that she had built her entire social persona on a lie, frequently playing the tragic, grieving sister who claimed her younger sister was a reckless delinquent who ran away and broke the family's heart. My parents blindly echoed her narrative, living comfortably under Evelyn's shadow while using my fictional downfall to gain sympathy at social gatherings. They thought I was living in obscurity, broken and forgotten. They had no idea that while they were busy maintaining Evelyn's gilded illusion, I was quietly building an unshakable empire of my own. By the time I reached my 28th birthday, 10 full years had passed since the night I was locked out in the freezing rain. My business was thriving, my name was respected in commercial real estate circles, and my past felt like a bad dream I had long outgrown. But peace, I've learned, is often fragile when unsettled debts are left hanging in the air. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when my receptionist called my private office, her voice carrying an unusual note of hesitation. "Chloe, there's a gentleman in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he insists it's urgent. He says it's regarding your sister, Evelyn." My chest tightened, a phantom reflex from a life I'd left behind. I stepped out into the lobby and found an older man in an impeccably tailored navy suit pacing near the window. He looked exhausted, his face lined with deep stress. He introduced himself as Arthur Vance, Evelyn's father-in-law, a senior partner at a major regional investment firm. We sat down in my private office, and what he revealed turned my blood cold. Evelyn's lavish lifestyle was a hollow shell. Over the past 3 years, she had accumulated catastrophic gambling debts and failed investments, hiding them beneath a mountain of fraudulent loans. But the real bomb dropped when Arthur set a thick manila folder on my desk. "Evelyn didn't just take out loans in her name, Chloe," Arthur said quietly, his voice trembling with shame. When her creditors began pressing, she opened multiple credit lines, shell companies, and high-interest mortgages using your name, your social security number, and your old personal details. She told her husband, my son, that you were her business partner who managed her private assets. Evelyn had been using my stolen identity as her financial shield, assuming I was still living in poverty and would never find out. But she had made one fatal calculation. She didn't realize that her reckless delinquent sister was now a seasoned real estate mogul who knew how to audit financial fraud down to the last cent. The hunter was about to become the prey. I didn't rage or panic. Instead, I channeled every ounce of professional discipline I'd built over the past decade. Working alongside Arthur Vance and my personal corporate attorney, we systematically gathered bank records, forged signatures, and digital paper trails. The evidence was damning, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Evelyn had committed grand larceny and identity fraud. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an unknown caller. I answered, and after 10 long years, I heard my mother's voice. She was sobbing, sounding fragile and desperate. "Chloe, sweetie, it's Mom. We've missed you so much. Please, can we meet for dinner? We need to talk as a family." They didn't want reconciliation. They were drowning. Arthur had confronted Evelyn that morning, giving her 24 hours before reporting her to federal authorities. Evelyn and my parents needed me to sign an affidavit declaring that I had authorized those business transactions, taking the blame to save her from prison. I agreed to meet them at an upscale downtown restaurant. When I walked in, wearing a sharp tailored suit and flanked by my corporate lawyer, my parents and Evelyn looked stunned. They expected a broken, desperate girl eager for their approval. Instead, they were facing a powerhouse. My father stood up, attempting a warm smile, but I remained standing, placing a thick leather binder on the table with a firm thud. Evelyn's face went ghastly white when she recognized the firm's logo on the cover. "You called me here to save you, didn't you?" I said, my voice steady and crystal clear. 10 years ago, you threw me into the street with $50 and trash bags because Evelyn demanded it. Today, Evelyn stands to lose everything because of her own greed. My mother began to weep, begging me to save the family name, while Evelyn sneered, trying to play the victim one last time. "You owe us, Chloe. We're blood. Blood didn't keep me warm in my car at 18, I replied coldly. My lawyer opened the binder, laying out the criminal charges ready for filing. "You have 2 choices, Evelyn. You surrender yourself tomorrow morning and confess to identity theft, or my attorney files these documents directly with the district attorney. Choose quickly." Evelyn sat frozen, her mouth open in horror as she stared at the mountain of evidence laid out beside her plate. The mask of perfection she had worn her entire life shattered right there at the dinner table. She tried to look to our father for protection, but for the first time in his life, My father had nothing to say. He looked at the forged signatures, the fraudulent loans, and the staggering debt, finally realizing that the daughter he had protected for a decade had ruined them all. Evelyn didn't surrender gracefully. The very next day, facing the undeniable paper trail, her husband filed for divorce and removed her from his family's accounts. Without her wealthy in-laws to shield her, federal investigators moved quickly. Evelyn was formally charged with identity theft and wire fraud, eventually taking a plea deal that resulted in a mandatory prison sentence and complete financial ruin. My parents were forced to downsize drastically, selling their home to pay off the civil liabilities Evelyn had tied to their estate. They reached out to me repeatedly, leaving tearful voicemails begging for forgiveness, but I kept my boundaries firm. They had made their choice 10 years ago. I was simply letting them live with it. Being thrown out at 18 was the most painful experience of my life, but it also forced me to build a foundation so strong that no one could ever tear me down again. Today, my business continues to flourish, and I wake up every morning in a life built on truth, hard work, and self-respect. I didn't get revenge. I just let karma do its job while I built my own future. Now, I'm curious about your thoughts. If you were in my shoes, would you have ever forgiven your family, or would you have walked away forever, just like I did? Comment your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to check out the other video on your screen right now for another incredible story. Thank you so much for watching.